Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores!
Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks.
Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into the October 2nd edition of Gamecock Pod Live, episode number 1586. It is officially Cocktober in Gamecock Nation, and South Carolina will take on Ole Miss Saturday afternoon at 3:30 with Dusty Dvorak as the color analyst, Dave Pash as the play-by-play, and Taylor McGregor on the sideline. The game will be on ESPN, and it should be a packed and raucous crowd at Williams-Brice Stadium for what should be another special environment. The last time Ole Miss played at Williams-Brice Stadium was in 2009, and that was the birth of Sandstorm. Ole Miss ranked number 4 in the country, and at the time, that was South Carolina's first home win over a top 5 opponent. And essentially it was the defense that carried the day for the Gamecocks in that one. South Carolina and LSU last met in 2020 with Ole Miss winning 59-42. That's the game Lane Kiffin threw his clipboard. That was the end of the Will Muschamp era. All right, let's jump into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. We've got a great show for you today. In just a couple minutes, we will be joined by Alex Jones from the Big Spur. And then in the second half of the show today, the award-winning women's basketball beat writer from the state and GoGamecocks.com, Payton Titus, will join the show to talk about South Carolina's pursuit of back-to-back national championships. Today's news, notes, and headlines brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster area, Nana's Porch, your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or the big backyard bash with a whole hog barbecue. Nana's Porch has got you covered. Now, folks, they're already booking into 2025, so if you've got an event, go to nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. You'll love it. I guarantee it. I strongly urge all of you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. And now, for the first time, you can order Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese last year voted both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association. The Great Smoky Jalapeno and the Great Regular Flavor, just by going to the website, click on pimento cheese at the top of the website. It'll pull you up to the next page where it says, click here to order your pimento cheese with free shipping. Southern Foods will ship it right to your front doorstep, usually in about 2 days. And they have all kinds of different selections of 2-packs of Nana's Porch pimento cheese. It is a great addition to any tailgate or any watch party menu. Again, nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Now let's go ahead and bring in Alex, because I want to go ahead and ask him. The top lead story is yesterday at Shane Beamer's news conference. Not that it really means anything until tonight when the first SEC mandatory availability report is issued. But Alex, you were probably sitting there when Shane Beamer said Lenora Sellers, Rocket Sanders, and Jared Brown were all fine. But what say you, Alex? Because that spread is a little bit too high for me if Lenora Sellers and Rocket Sanders are full go for this weekend's game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We'll have to see kind of tonight. We'll get a more clear picture tonight around 8 o'clock when that availability reports update. And I'm interested to see, how Lenoris and Rocket and what they're listed as. But, Shane did talking yesterday in his press conference, said Lenoris and Rocket were both out there and both looked good. I thought it was interesting that he did, say, were they 100%? He said, and he's like, I wouldn't say they were 100%, but they still have a few days to continue to get ready, and I'm interested to see how they are listed tonight when that availability report comes out.
All right, so that's really your big Nana's Porch news note and highlight. There is more, and it's all related to football recruiting. First, Alex, I want to know, what did you do on the bye week and on Saturday? Were you able to just sit back and watch the games and relax? And how did it feel to not have to be in full beat writer mode of getting all your stuff together, making sure you got your power cord for your laptop, make sure you got your credential, your parking pass, and get ready to head over to the stadium?
Yeah, throughout the whole bye week, it felt weird not to have press conferences on Tuesday and Wednesday, then listen to the call-in show on Thursday. It just felt weird. And then Saturday, it was nice to be able to just sit around and watch football all day. That's exactly what I did. I don't think I moved all day long from the TV. I started watching that Kentucky Ole Miss game, and it was on from there all the way through that Alabama-Georgia game, which is incredible. But that was awesome just to be able to sit there and, get to watch all those games. But now looking forward to getting back on the beat this weekend with the Ole Miss game.
All right, so I'm interested to ask, though, do you have YouTube TV? Because for those of us that have YouTube TV, they have the multi-view where you can watch 4 games at one time. And if you've got a big TV screen, like I got a 70-inch, and then I still got 2 32-inch TVs stacked beside of it in my man cave / office. I'm watching 4 games at one time until it got down to that Alabama-Georgia game. And then I got the Penn State-Illinois game going over on the side. BD Brett just didn't have the energy to pull that one off. But what an instant classic, Alabama, Georgia, and particularly the ending. Alex, at halftime, I thought the game was getting ready to be over, but it just wouldn't be Wednesday without me having something to say about the SEC officiating crews. And there was an obvious DPI on Georgia at the end of that half that would have set Alabama up at the 15-yard line with about a minute and a half to go that was not called. Early in the Kentucky Ole Miss game, there was an obvious DPI against Dane Key in the end zone where the guy basically had wrapped him up like he was falling out of an airplane, and Dane Key was the only one with a parachute and no call. But to me, if Alabama gets another touchdown or another score right before the half and it's 37-7, that game's over, but it didn't happen, and Georgia got back in it in the second half. But what a first half performance by Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer. I mean, they carved up Georgia like a Christmas turkey. What were your thoughts watching that game?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Kalen DeBoer passed his first test at Alabama in this one. Like, they came out, they looked prepared, and they were fired up. And, I mean, they jumped out to that lead. And I just sitting there watching that game, I was like, I don't know if Georgia is going to get back into this one. And, you know, Carson Beck got off to a slow start and struggled in that first half. And then kind of going into that second half, credit to him and Georgia's offense for bouncing back because he kind of got that team back into the game. And, you know, he made some throws that, you know, and eventually put Georgia back in the lead, which was just crazy after I flipped back and saw that Georgia was coming back. I thought, oh, maybe I need to stick around and watch this one. And, you know, that ending was just wild. He had Georgia take the lead, and then Ryan Williams showed who he is, and everybody know who he was already, but that got special. He'd only be a true freshman. That last touchdown that he scored was insane. And, you know, I think Jalen Milroe put himself right in that Heisman conversation, and, you know, maybe he's even leading that conversation right now. And, you know, those two are just special, and it's, you know, I think that team's going to rightfully so number one right now because they showed it. And, you know, I think Georgia this week having Auburn is going to probably allow them not to have that letdown game. Not that Kirby Smart will let them have that letdown game, but, you know, I'm interested to watch that one as well.
Well, Alex, so I got to ask, and then I'm going to jump right back in with you, but I'm not leaving the room here. Auburn, let's talk about Hugh Freeze, okay? They got all that Yellowwood money. They let Robbie Ashford bolt to South Carolina, and Payton Thorne and that other stiff that they got rotating in at quarterback. I mean, Auburn does not have a quarterback. And now I think they have 3 home losses on the Plains. The natives have got to be getting restless on the Plains, and particularly, and look, nobody's going to confuse Akron's defense with an SEC defense, but Robbie Ashford, hell, Payton Thorne, he couldn't go 15 for 21 against no defense the way they're playing right now.
Yeah, it's very obvious they have struggles at quarterback going on right now. And, you know, I think when they look back into the season, I think Auburn probably thinks back to thinking that they may be willing to take a quarterback in this transfer portal cycle. But, you know, it's going to be tough for them moving forward. That schedule doesn't get any easier. And, you know, I think it's interesting, you know, be interesting to see what they're going to do this season, because, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to look at their schedule, and I just don't know how many wins. I think right now you're probably not getting to a bowl game if you're projecting down the road, just because of those offensive struggles. Like, you know, they keep turning the ball over, and that hasn't stopped. And, I mean, it looked like Auburn probably had that game pretty much well in their right, and then had that pick 6, and it was over from there, because you just wonder, like, I don't think Auburn can get back into this one. So quarterback's obviously a big struggle there, and that's something that, you know, they're kind of stuck with right now, and it's not going to be able to change.
And so it also wouldn't be Wednesday if it wasn't time for me to take my weekly shot at the Tar Heel State, where it's clearly basketball season everywhere except maybe Durham. And Manny Diaz, who I'm still not convinced, because when you have really good players, which clearly Mike Elko left behind, they were able to get Malik Murphy to transfer from Texas. North Carolina, after being totally embarrassed, getting a 70-piece hung on them by James Madison the week before, 53 of them at halftime.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, imagine eating 53 wings in the first half. You can't hardly eat any more. They still got 17 more down in the second half. North Carolina bounces back. They're up 20-0 late in the third quarter, and Duke comes all the way back and beats them 21-20. And look, our hearts go out to everybody in the Tar Heel State because of the storm, particularly in western North Carolina, the devastation. Shane Beamer and staff were out on Thursday recruiting. Friday, they were not able to be out, but clearly that is minuscule compared to the suffering and the devastation that's gone on that state. But Alex, this week, if it's me on Friday night, every coach on the staff is either going to see North Carolina commits, NC State commits, or Auburn commits, because it should be open season, and Florida commitments, because it's just a matter of when and not if Sun Belt Billy is relieved of his duties at Florida. And I know at the LSU game, South Carolina did have the big defensive tackle from Grayson who committed to Florida on campus. I mean, it seems to me like, and Frederick chimes in, FSU as well. Well, I mean, Malik Clark, he decommitted yesterday. But before we get into that, Alex, your thoughts on attacking the Tar Heel State, basically now that every program is down outside of Duke, and you know it's only a matter of time before Manny Diaz is a fraud that shows up. I think South Carolina's got a real opportunity with FSU, with Auburn, with North Carolina, NC State getting boat raced by Clemson. It just ought to be, it's open season, but you got to still win if you're South Carolina.
Yeah, and that was going to be my point right there, is for South Carolina in this instance, too, they got to, continue to keep that momentum that they have right now. And I think this week will be key with that, with the amount of recruits that they're having in. But yeah, to your point, it's going to be interesting with those teams to watch to see what the recruiting classes end up like, because, winning is everything, and winning builds momentum. And some of those programs that you mentioned just don't have that momentum right now. And, I think you're seeing that with, you mentioned Malik Clark, he decommitted yesterday. So it's going to be interesting with those recruiting classes. I'm sure that's probably in the plan that they're looking at to see, who are we on already that we could maybe continue to keep recruiting and maybe go see here on Friday nights or moving forward.
So, I mean, I can think of Malik Clark. He will, I believe, be making his third trip to Williams-Brice Stadium on Saturday. 6'2.5", 185, 10'5", 100 meters. He decommitted from Florida State. 2025 Dutch Fork linebacker Josh Smith, 6'3", 220. He took an official visit to NC State, but he'll be back in Columbia on Saturday. I think the Gamecocks are in strong position for him. Hammond tight end Mike Tyler, 6'4", 225. He's coming back for his second straight or third home game, because he was in the stands for the LSU game. He was committed. He came in for the Akron game. Now he'll be back for Ole Miss. And then 2026 Irmo wide receiver Donovan Murph yesterday announced he's reclassifying the class of 2025. He will be at Williams-Brice Stadium, 6'1.5", 188 from Irmo High School. I mean, we're just getting started. There's junior college defensive tackle Kelton McHale from Jones County. Georgia Tech four-star offensive tackle commit Demola Ajitahan, 6'6", 285 from Duluth, will be making an official visit. this weekend, and I have to wonder, Alex, who else is showing up? Is Jared Smith coming back? Is Kevin Wynn coming back? I mean, this is another huge recruiting weekend for South Carolina. So talk to us about the decision by Donovan Murph to reclassify into the class of 2025.
Yeah, that was interesting yesterday. That happened, had some movement from a couple wide receivers in that 2026 class. But, for him to reclassify to that 2025 class, I think, it probably shows that he thinks he's ready, that can go ahead and get the classwork done and go ahead and get into college. And, I wonder, moving forward in a couple of years, like, I wonder if you're going to keep seeing that with some positions just because of the world of NIL and all that. But specifically with Murph, like, I remember watching him this summer at camp, and, after seeing all these wide receivers and multiple classes, like, I think, in my opinion, he was one of the ones that stood out the most. Like, he's just fast. He just really polished receiver. And, for him, like, he's not the only one in Columbia that's a really talented receiver. You got Jordan Gidron, too, who's 2026 guy of Ridgeview, who's going to be in this weekend, I think, for the third straight game. And it seems like South Carolina's in a good spot for him. But going back to Murph, I think, South Carolina's put himself in position. I think there's going to be some competition, though, which is not surprising considering how talented he is. I think when you think about Murph, you think about Clemson, Alabama, and Colorado, and maybe Tennessee in there too. But, really, really talented receiver. And as far as the recruiting list this weekend, like, it's only Wednesday and it's already a loaded list. And who knows who's going to show up here on that list come Saturday when we're out there watching to see who shows up.
I mean, Alex, no doubt about it. I think he's probably had to be inspired by Ryan Williams from Alabama. He was in Tuscaloosa for that game. He's 17 years old. Donovan Murph will be 18 now, if even reclassifying. He watched him have 6 catches for 177 yards and a touchdown, the game-winning touchdown in that game, right after Georgia had a long touchdown reception. And, he looked like a world-class ballerina after he caught the ball with the pirouette on the sideline and then exploding past the defenders. That's going to be big boy recruiting for South Carolina, no doubt. He did say he's going to narrow his list and take official visits. He may not be ready to render a decision in the December signing period, particularly since it's been moved up. So he could be a guy for February. But Alex, you probably have the same feeling, but I just got this feeling it's not going to be long until Malik Clark is a member of the South Carolina recruiting class. And I feel pretty strongly about Josh Smith as well.
Yeah, with Clark, it seems like there's been some momentum. They've had momentum in that recruitment for a while, and then leading up to that commitment, and then ends up committing to Florida State. But then, he came to the game 2 weekends ago in Akron, and I think, it just seems like the momentum's there in South Carolina's favor. And then for him to decommit, I think that maybe starts the process. But, he's still got a lot of teams on him, too, as you can imagine with how talented he is. And then with Josh Smith, like, he seems, a guy who decommitted from Coastal Carolina earlier this week. And you mentioned earlier, South Carolina seems to be in a good spot there with him being just a Dutch Fork kid right down the road. So, I think he's one, too, who could be maybe a late riser a little bit. You can see him rise the rankings. I'm interested to see just how his senior tape ends up, but he's definitely got his South Carolina's all about right now.
All right, so what about Mike Tyler? Because this has been one of the most bizarre recruitments, hot and cold. It was hot with South Carolina, then in the summer it went cold, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's committed to LSU. Now he's going to be back for his third home game at South Carolina. Could the tide be turning here away from LSU for the Columbia native? Potentially seeing a guy like Josh Smith, who's a Columbia kid, Malik Clark, who's a top in-state prospect, and the other in-state guys South Carolina has. Could that be a pull on Mike Tyler, as well as seeing what Joshua Simon is doing? And this is his last year at the tight end position.
Yeah, it's real. His recruitment's been really interesting, as you mentioned. South Carolina was on him for a little while, his junior season and kind of leading up to that. And then it seems like things maybe kind of cooled off a little bit. South Carolina wasn't in his final, I think, 3 when he committed to LSU. And then, he came to that LSU game and then came to the Akron game. And, he was around on the field in pregame, saw him talking to Shane Beamer at one point. So it seems like there's some traction now coming with South Carolina in this one. And, yeah, you mentioned it, that there's an opportunity next year for playing time with, some of the departures South Carolina will have. So, I think with him, it's just going to have to be keeping an eye on to see. And I think, it's obvious there's traction going on right now because of him coming back for the game this weekend. So it's going to be one that I think that's going to be worth keeping an eye on here moving forward.
No doubt about it. So another late riser, this one from the JUCO ranks, a guy who was committed to Liberty, Kelton McHale, 6'2", 300 from Jones County, South Carolina, obviously needs to restock at the defensive tackle position. They are on FSU commitment Kevin Wynn, but so is Georgia, Texas, and others. But Georgia can't take everybody. This will be his first trip to Williams-Brice. How do you handicap this recruitment?
Yeah, South Carolina's been on him for a little while now, and I think it's pretty big for them to get him in on a visit this weekend, because that obviously, as you mentioned, is a position of need, just with who you could be losing, or you think you're going to be losing more than a couple of defensive tackles in that room, and they just need some more depth in there, and that's going to be a position. You mentioned Kevin Wynn too; he's a guy that they've been on, and but we're going to have to keep on watching him just because of the schools that you mentioned are after him, but. Defensive tackle is a spot that's going to be interesting to watch, see how they kind of build that room back up. I think it's obviously going to have to use a transfer portal some in that regard, just to build maybe some, just some older veteran players in that room. So it's a key position going forward in recruitment right now.
All right, so South Carolina had Rutgers commitment, Michael Clayton, cornerback out of Northside High School in Warner Robins, Georgia, 6'1", 175, 10.44 in the 100 meters. He's been committed to Rutgers. South Carolina, he got that offer. He's been in Columbia as an unofficial visitor. Alex, what are your thoughts on Michael Clayton potentially at the corner position? Because, quite frankly, South Carolina needs more corners next year.
Yeah, that's another position, too. You kind of think about defensive tackle. That's another position, too, that they're going to need to hit in recruiting and in the transfer portal. And I looking at his film, I think he fits exactly what Torian Gray's looking for in a corner, and that's obvious with them offering him. I think he'd be a really good addition. And, Greg Schiano really knows what he's looking for in defensive players. And, I think he'd be, if Greg Schiano wants him, I think that's a sign as the type of player that he is. So I'm really interested to see what this recruitment looks like moving forward.
All right, and then South Carolina missed on their top targets on the offensive line in the summer. One guy that they had offered but really didn't do a whole lot with, Damola Ajadahan, 6'6", 285, now a 4-star ranked offensive tackle prospect. He's been committed to Georgia Tech. He's out of Duluth. By the way, if you don't know, that's where George Rogers played, Duluth, Georgia. He's making an official visit to South Carolina. We all know Lonnie Teasley's strength is his recruiting. How are you handicapping this recruitment now, as he is clearly another flip target for the Gamecocks?
Yeah, it seems like South Carolina's put themselves in position here, to be in this recruitment. And, Lonnie Teasley has been a really strong recruiter so far. And obviously there's some traction here and kind of going with his Georgia Tech commitment with Brent Key being the head coach there. That guy he knows what he's looking for with an offensive lineman. And, I think if Brent Key wants an offensive lineman, I think any school in the country is going to want him. And that's shown with this kid. I mean, he's got all the offers that he could have and is going to have a bunch. In addition to Georgia Tech, there's a whole bunch of other teams that are really trying to flip this kid right now. So it's going to be one to, there's obviously a little bit of traction here with him taking an official visit. And, we'll see kind of after this weekend where things stand with him.
All right, so obviously all the head will be there. One guy I do want to ask about, it seems like Cutter Woods is having this huge senior season. I think South Carolina really got a steal flipping him from Wake Forest in the summer. Is he a guy whose stock could be on the rise because they're winning and he's putting up big numbers and he's a big kid who's got a live arm and a quick release? What are your thoughts on Cutter Woods?
Yeah, I think it shows right now through the start of his senior season. He's kind of building off what he did as a junior, which he turned in a really strong junior season, and saw him in camp. And, he just kind of, with it being a 7-on-7 camp, he really looked really good in that. And he's just capitalizing on that so far in his senior season. And, South kind of offered it, and it didn't take long for him to flip that commitment. So, I think he's going to be one that could potentially continue to rise in the rankings. And I think, when we look back at this recruitment here in a couple of years, I think South Carolina's going to see that they made a good move here to go ahead and offer Cutter Woods, because I think he's got a chance to be really good.
No doubt about it. All right, so Alex, is there any like G14 classified recruits that that are coming in? I mean, let me quote Tommy Bowden here. You don't have to tell me. You can just wink 2 times if there is. But it certainly seems like it's another huge opportunity for South Carolina this weekend with the crowd. But let's dive in a little bit to Ole Miss, because clearly they are not invincible. Even though Shane Beamer mentioned this will be the biggest size and height-wise offensive line South Carolina will face all season. They went in the transfer portal. And so I do want to apologize, because it seems like AT&T's having problems this morning with the internet. So I do apologize for that. But, I mean, I watched every bit of that Kentucky Ole Miss game. And see what, Clayton White can take from Kentucky's defensive game plan and apply to South Carolina's defense this weekend against Ole Miss, because they were not invincible.
Yeah, and going back to, I think, the Friday before that game, it looked like, it was announced that Maxwell Hairston, who's Kentucky's top cornerback, was going to be out. And, he's a guy who could be a first-round draft pick. So I was interested to see, I was worried that, for Kentucky, that Ole Miss's receivers would take advantage of that. And to give Kentucky credit, like I think they maybe showed a little bit of a blueprint for South Carolina to how they can find ways to limit Kentucky's offense. And I think the key for South Carolina in this one is defensive line has to get after Jackson Dart. And I think Kentucky showed that you can, that Ole Miss, that you can get after Jackson Dart. And, when you think about South Carolina's edges, I think they have a chance to maybe make an impact in this game, because if you let Jackson Dart just sit back there and have time in the pocket with those receivers, he can, pick you apart. So I think one of the other bigger keys for this one in South Carolina is to limit explosive plays. If you can just make it to where if they're going to drive on you, make it where it takes them a long time to drive. And once you get down, if they get down into the red zone, find ways to hold them to field goals. So I think defensively, that's the game plan right there, is to find ways to get after Jackson Dart. And if you can get after him with 4, that's great because you can drop more into coverage. So limit the explosive plays for South Carolina and find ways to get after Jackson Dart if you can.
So I thought Kentucky did a great job of that. They played 2 high safeties most of the game to try to take away. But, man, Trey Harris, 11 catches, 176 yards, and Juice Wells didn't even scratch. Now, having said that, I would like to remind South Carolina fans about the ghost of Jermaine Cousinard in the NCAA tournament. We don't want to see that, but Alex, you are clearly on to something here, and Shane Beamer mentioned it, is South Carolina's got to tackle well in space. I thought that was what Kentucky maybe did better than anything else, is they didn't let a 6-yard play turn into a 60-yard play. I mean, they are going to get their yards. They go fast. They call it NASCAR out here in Texas high school football. They play up tempo. They are extremely talented with Harris, Caden Lee. Henry Parrish is a really good back who's also a threat out of the backfield. We know we've seen what Juice Wells can do, and I'd have to think, knowing Lane Kiffin, Juice Wells is probably going to be a big part of the game plan. But how do you think Clayton White attacks this team? Because, number one, you got to still stop the run. Kentucky did a great job of that. Ole Miss also limited Kentucky on the ground. But, I mean, I look at Brock Vandegrift, who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn against South Carolina. He was 18 for 28, 243 yards, and he had the long pass to Dane Key for the game winner. Ole Miss is vulnerable in the secondary. Yeah, they got Walter Noland and Princely and a big defensive end from Georgia Tech that transferred out there 2 years ago. They're imposing on the defensive front. They're good at linebacker, but their secondary, I think, can be exposed, and Kentucky did expose them.
Yeah, exactly. I think Kentucky showed offensively, too, that you can attack this Ole Miss secondary. And, I think one of the bigger keys offensively for South Carolina is you got to find a way to run the ball consistently. And that's regardless if Rocket Sanders plays or if he doesn't. Like, if he plays or doesn't, like, they have to find a way to consistently run the ball that kind of help the offensive line and help that defensive line, or help kind of contain the defensive line, too, because they got some talented guys. Think of Jared Ivey and, Walter Nolan on the inside's a stud. Like, he's really, really good. So find a way to run the ball, and I think that's going to help open up the passing game. And, if, with Lenoris in there, if he does indeed play, his legs, and even Robbie too, but like with their having that quarterback run too, is going to find ways to open up that run game. And wouldn't be surprised if you see some rollout type of stuff to try to kind of help the offensive line and kind of get the passing game going.
All right, so Robbie Ashford. Obviously, 2 weeks ago, he was the highest rated quarterback by Pro Football Focus in college football for his performance against Akron. Now you went through open date practices. Shane Beamer said they got better. Now you're into game week. Lenore Sellers has already missed 1/4 of the Kentucky game. He missed half of the second half of the LSU game, and he missed all of the Akron game. At this point, doesn't Dow Loggins have to figure out a way to get both Lenore Sellers and Robbie Ashford ready to run the offense, given the fact that Lenoris has already missed 7 quarters of play through 4 games?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to have that plan ready to go whenever you need it. And, I think Robbie showed in the Akron game that he can, consistently throw the ball, has some good deep balls in that game, the one to Mazio Bennett. And we know what he can do with his legs. And he's really good with his legs, but I think he may be even better than people think with his legs. Like, he looks like a running back running the ball with his vision and his kind of just wherewithal running the ball. So, I think they probably now seeing that, the injury issues that Lenore's had in these first few weeks, I'm sure that they have a plan that's ready to go for if they need Robbie Ashford in that game.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to, because you can't not give him first team reps and then find yourself back in that same situation as the second half of Ole Miss, where you just literally, they were scared to death to throw the football. I mean, they basically conceded on third downs, and even on the last series of the game on second down, they just ran it up the middle for 1 yard and then settled for a 49-yard field goal, which was not good. And so to me, I think they have to do that. I thought the guy that really stood out to me in the second half of LSU and then against Akron, Gage Larvadain. I think clearly his health issues were holding him back. He really looks like an impact player. What is your thought on Gage Larvadain? He's now listed potentially as a starter at one of those three wide receiver positions.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of him moving forward. And you mentioned it. I think he was banged up in the preseason. That kind of limited him through those first few games because really didn't see him too much. And you think of Old Dominion, Kentucky, and even LSU didn't see too much of him, and then kind of showed up here in these previous games. So he's one who, when you look at him, he's just a fast guy. You can see that in his tape from Miami, Ohio. Like, he's a kind of a burner type that he can make that deep ball. And we saw that those deep ball plays, and you saw that against Akron. So he's one that's you're going to have to watch here moving forward. And I think he adds a kind of another dynamic to that wide receiver room that needs that.
I mean, I think that room's kind of coming on. I thought, Van Drevis Jacobs, I really want to see him break out because he's clearly got the talent. Jared Brown is playing well. I thought Delvon Campbell made one of the best catches I've seen from a South Carolina wide receiver other than Xavier Legette that got called back. That's the one that got called back for offensive pass interference, which was clearly a ghost, basically, in that game, because there's no chance that there was offensive pass interference on that play, Alex. And that was a great catch by Delvon Campbell, which I was hoping, if that one counted, I thought that could really boost his confidence because he's a guy that needs to come on for South Carolina.
Yeah, exactly. Not to go back into that LSU game, but I mean, that was a great catch by him. And, I think even though it did get called back, that can still give you confidence because, I mean, you still made the catch on the play. So he's one that, in that wide receiver room, a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember, I think it may have been either before or after Kentucky, Shane Beaver mentioned that Jared Brown and Mazio Bennett were kind of the top two in that room and that they're still looking for some players to step up. And I think you're starting to see that a little bit. We saw what Dre Jacobs could do in that Old Dominion game. And, I think now maybe a bye week probably helped him to kind of reset and get back into that Old Dominion form. And then you mentioned Delvon Campbell and Gage Larvadain. So it seems like there's maybe a kind of a top five kind of coming to the surface in that room. And that's exactly what they need here moving forward.
Yeah, and I'd have to say Nick Harbor's sixth because he has been getting into the game. He has been getting some targets and making catches, which is good. All right, so let's turn to the offensive line because South Carolina, 16 sacks through 4 games, clearly not good enough. It's not all on the offensive line. We know you are starting a true freshman at left tackle. Kason Henry has not played much football. It's been a lot of things. But one of the things I noticed was in the second half, Marquis Anderson and Trevon Ball basically went the entire way at offensive guards. Do you think there's a chance that one of those guys supplant Kamar Bell at that left guard position.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if the bye week, if they kind of moved into that or kind of tested that out. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I would lean maybe towards that they stick with the starting five just to see from the start of this LSU game, just because you want to keep that continuity on the offensive line. But I wouldn't be surprised if those guys, because Trevon Ball showed what he can do last year. As a true freshman, it was like I think a true freshman All-American by some outlet. So I think he's one that you could throw in there and he'll be ready to go. And Marquis Anderson's a guy that continues to get hype. It's just got to continue to stay healthy for him. But I think he's a guy. Those two are ones moving forward that you could see maybe play some more if they want to go that route.
No doubt. So defensively, I think. I pulled the stats up, Alex. South Carolina in the first quarter and the fourth quarter, they are dominating their opponents. In the second and third quarter, not so much. I think it's 30. They're outscoring their opponents in the second quarter 30-29, and in the third quarter 24-17. But they are dominating their opponents in the first and fourth quarters. How does Dowell Loggins find a way to keep their foot on the gas? Because the script has been amazing, but there's kind of been a lull in the second and third quarters. And part of that's because they just haven't been able to run the football. Clearly that was not an issue against Akron. But third down, they still got to be a lot better. I think they were 28% going into the Akron game. Still had to convert 4 out of 5 on fourth down to keep drives alive. How do they improve that third down offense? Because to me, that's going to be key. Kentucky found a way to stay on the field. They possessed the ball almost 40 minutes in that Ole Miss game.
Yeah, I think the key there is finding a way to consistently run the ball because, I think when you look back at South Carolina's third down issues this year, they've just been to where it's third and long a lot of times, 3rd and 10, where the defense can either kind of sit back and play in zone and cover up all the passing lanes, or they'll just rush the passer. And so I think the key is to find if you're in your third down situations, being a manageable third down situation where in your 3rd and 4 or less to kind of make it to where the defense may not know what you're going to do, either running the ball or passing the ball. So key to sustaining drives and helping that, what you were pointing out earlier, sustaining drives, that you got to be better on third downs. And I know that's been an emphasis here kind of in that bye week, that they've got to find ways to get themselves in either better third down stats or just manageable third downs to where they can help themselves.
All right, so obviously it's going to be a big day at Williams-Brice Stadium. I mean, Alex, it's Wednesday. We don't know what, that availability report is going to look like. I mean, how do you see this game breaking down? Because to me, this is a coin flip game, just like that LSU game was a coin flip game. But I think a lot of it's going to be, it is Jimmy's and Joe's, but to me, both teams have Jimmy's and Joe's, and that's when it boils down to coaching. And I think Clayton White and Dowell Loggins have got to be at their best this weekend.
Yeah, the SEC is a line of scrimmage league, and that's going to come. I think that's what this game is going to come down to. Defensively, South Carolina's got to find a way to put pressure and either one, stop the run, and then two, get after Jackson Dart if they can. And then on the other side, they got to find a way to protect the quarterback and also find a way to run the ball. And if South Carolina can win both of those, win the line of scrimmage on both sides, I think they got a good chance to pull this one off. But the key is just there. They can't let Dart sit back there and kind of have time to throw and sit and pick apart the secondary with the receivers that they have. So, I think I can see this just being a back and forth game that, I got a feeling it's going to come down all the way to the end.
All right. Well, Alex, great stuff as always. I know you got to head over to the coordinators' press conferences. I'm really interested to see what Dowell Loggins and Clayton White have to say. And I guess we'll be waiting till 8 o'clock tonight for that availability report to come out and see what the initial status is for Lenora Sellers, Rocket Sanders, and Jared Brown. But great stuff as always. Appreciate you coming on the show. All the best this week, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
I always enjoy being on. I appreciate it.
All right. That was Alex Jones from thebigspur.com. And so we stay in Columbia and welcome in the award-winning beat writer for Go Gamecocks in the state, good friend of the program, Payton Titus. Payton, first of all, it's just great to see that you're alive and well after battling pneumonia. How are you feeling?
Much better now. I still have kind of a nasty cough, but apparently those tend to linger, so I can live with it. But I do think I might have pulled a muscle by my ribs from coughing so much. That lets you know kind of how I've been recovering. But listen, I'm just glad not to have a fever and to be feeling good aside from just that one thing. So I'll take it.
Well, at least you weren't spending 11 days in intensive care like I was, and then being rushed into emergency surgery from my bout with pneumonia in 2012. I showed up at the emergency room and was in septic shock. My blood pressure was 60/40. And so I'm certainly glad you did not have to go through any of that, because I hope I again. So Payton, this Gamecock women's basketball team, they were at the White House. It's the first time Dawn Staley and her team have been to the White House, even though it's not the first time. They won the national championship, and Payton went home to go to the White House with the team. There were a lot of media members there, and I watched it streaming on the White House YouTube channel. I thought it was a great ceremony. Dawn Staley, I thought, was tremendous. The ladies looked fantastic. What was it like being in the White House? Was that your first time at the White House? And just tell us about the event itself.
Yeah, so I had been once on like a public tour in like 8th grade for our DC trip, but it definitely was not like this experience. I had not in 8th grade been able to go to the White House press briefing room or walk through that little side security gate and give Secret Service my driver's license and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was really neat to see the lawn there and like the driveway and the giant gates and all that kind of stuff. So it was super cool just to be in that environment and to see stuff that I'd only previously seen on TV before. So yeah, it was super cool. The event was really nice. It was in the East Room, so you got to see it. It's very like gilded, the gold like wall to floor or ceiling to floor curtains and everything. And the players look cute in all their like pantsuits and dresses and stuff. Their business attire best, because that's what we were told the dress code was, business attire. And so it was nice to see them kind of in a different capacity. It reminded me a little bit of the SBs, but yeah, it was neat. I mean, one thing that I guess I didn't really, because I had watched the Aces White House trip this last summer, like in May or whenever it was, just because Asia was going to be there. And so I figured I was like, I should tune in. So I watched that, and I didn't expect for this trip that they were going to play the fight song. I thought that was really cool. I couldn't tell if it was like a live band, because it sounded like it could have been, and it was really loud. Like it really echoed through the place. And everybody, like, so the players walked into that, and the fact that there were so many South Carolina people there and like parents and people with connections to the program and stuff, like everybody was clapping along to the beat and chanting like "Go Cox" and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, this really feels like a South Carolina event in DC. Like we just picked up from over here and we dropped it right in the White House, which is pretty neat. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like you said, Coach Staley's speech was great, and President Biden made a joke about how people in South Carolina better hope she never runs for office one day because she would just be so good at it. And I think if you are a good college coach, then you've got a little bit of good politician in you anyway. That's like part of the gig. So wasn't surprised that she was very good at that, at the lectern like that. Yeah, and we didn't get to chat with her, unfortunately, but we did get to see her kind of like walking around. I think they had done some tours like around the premises, and then I think after they left the White House, they went to the African American Museum. But while they were touring the premises, we got to see some of the coaches. Yeah, and that was cool and fun. So we got to like wave and say hello, but we didn't necessarily get to ask her any questions. But it was neat to watch her kind of get a real kick out of being there, because I know people in the past have had their things to say about why they didn't go previously, like in the previous administration and like all that kind of stuff. But you could tell that she really, understood the gravity of where she was and took a lot of pride in the fact that she had been invited there. So yeah, it was a neat experience. It made the 19 hours of driving that I did to get there worth it. So yeah, it was fun.
So actually a good friend of mine's niece, shout out to Barbara, Michelle's mom. Michelle is one of the assistant directors at the African American Museum. She's a Columbia native. And her mom, Barbara, and her auntie, Hilda, are two of my favorite people in the world. So I think Michelle was involved with that. So shout out to them. So, all right, so now preseason practices started, and what is the to-do list for a team that returns 4 starters and every key reserve from a 38-0 undefeated national championship team? Obviously, there are big shoes to fill, literally and physically. The most outstanding player of the Final Four, Camila Cardoso, who is 6'7", departs. But there's no shortage of talent in the post position. I mean, you could go any number of directions, but what's on the to-do list for South Carolina as they start start preseason practice?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, it's figuring out how to replace Camila Cardoso. One thing that kind of struck me from Coach Staley's practice availability was she was like, I feel like we've had go-to post players for the last 10 years. And so I went back and I was like, yeah, okay. So since Asia Wilson has got here, basically. And now she feels like they don't necessarily have that, at this current moment in time, not necessarily that they can't get to that point with this current group of players that they have, but as of right now, they don't have that go-to individual for the first time in a decade. So it's going to be kind of a challenge figuring out how to move forward with that dynamic. So she was saying that at this point, it feels like it's going to be kind of like a by committee thing, which makes sense. I think, like you said, we've been talking all summer about the spoil of riches that she has on this roster, and the post is no different from guard play, right? So you have a lot of really talented players there who it'll be interesting to see kind of what roles that they take. I know Coach Staley was talking a lot about Sanaya Fagan after her 3-on-3 experience, how good that was for her, winning MVP, leading Team USA to gold, and I'm pretty sure she was a leading scorer also, so the whole nine. And she said also that she's really practicing the senior that they need her to be, and somebody who wants to get to the next level. And I think the thing with Fagan is that she's always been a great player, right? But I think, I think we've talked about it. Maybe we haven't talked about it, but like, sometimes wanting her to hustle a little bit more on defense and like some of decision-making, things like that. I think that Coach Staley can be hard on her because she knows the potential that she has. And so for her to say that she's been really pleased with her work in the preseason, I think is promising. And so I'm really interested to see kind of what not only leadership role, but like on court kind of role that she's going to take up this year. And then obviously we have Joyce Edwards, who Coach Staley said feels like she's been here forever because she's from here and because she's been around, and she was, like mopping or sweeping the floors when Aja Wilson was here and for tickets and things like that. So she seems to be coming along nicely and fitting in with the group really well. And then we have Miriam also, who is smiling, Coach Staley said, and also, like being challenged sometimes, but seemingly having a good time, kind of like fitting in. And I have been watching her and Breezy's TikToks, which have been really fun. It like that, all of that kind of aspect of it, like the chemistry and things like that with these new players from last year. Like I feel like, sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but when you have a team that stays intact after going through everything that they went through last year and accomplishing all that they accomplished last year, you might, in like certain kind of like line of thinking, you might worry a little bit about chemistry with new folks coming in, just like how are you going to mesh and how are you going to adjust to, your role, whether that's something that's smaller, excuse me, maybe than you hoped for and anticipated or whatever, like how's all that going to work? But it feels like this group is really meshing well, which is, will bode well on the court. And then other post players. Chloe Kitts, obviously starter from last year. Good to have her back and see what kind of role that she will take. And then Adele Tack obviously now is available. I'm excited to see her. The interesting thing, because I think we talked about, could Adele play for the 5? Looking at South Carolina's roster, the only like true center that's listed is Sakima Walker. Everybody else is listed as forwards or guards, obviously, but like talking about post players. So I'm intrigued to see what kind of like lineups and stuff that we're going to have there. And then also we don't know what Ashlyn Watkins' status will be at this point in time. Coach Staley reaffirmed that she is still suspended from team activities, and they'll see kind of how her situation plays out before making any further decisions. But if Ashlyn can play, then I think that based on last year, she would be poised for a Defensive Player of the Year caliber season. So that's also potentially an exciting thing too, depending on what happens with that. But even if she's not available, I mean, we just rattled off so many names of other individuals who could really make a difference and who could really shine this year. So I think that's primary number one as far as preseason to-do lists. And then also one thing that was interesting that Coach Staley said at her preseason availability was she wants this team to make better decisions. She wants this team to also like get mad when they're down and to use that to kind of tap into another level, which I didn't necessarily expect her to say, but I guess it does kind of make sense because last year, and this was part of her talking about, I'm adjusting to this kind of like new way of playing basketball and of being so like having so much fun, but being kind of lax. And like, that's not really what I like to do. I like to prepare to the nines and right. But, there were moments last year where they had poise when it looked like they might not pull games out. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is when Coach Staley said after the Tennessee game at Tennessee that she thought they were going to lose, which I thought that kind of struck me. But so for her to want, I guess, like a different yeah, that's pretty much it.
So to me, the biggest thing is to stay hungry because you're not really defending a national championship. Nobody can take the trophy. Mike Krzyzewski, back in the early 90s, when Duke was on a roll, he never talked about his team having to defend a title because there's no defense. It's yours. Nobody can take it away from you. You are in pursuit of another national championship. And to me, I think that's the way they have to approach it. How hungry are you to make history? Because it's been over about a decade since a team won back-to-back national championships. That was UConn. South Carolina has their opportunity to make more history by doing that. And so to me, that's the biggest thing. And then, is the starting lineup really the starting lineup? Because, quite frankly, I'm interested to know, because Malaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson, I don't think they're content with just being on the bench. I mean, to me, they're just like starters. And then I look at the front court, like you said. Okay, if you've got Kitts and Fagan, who, by the way, 2 years ago, when Aaliyah Boston was at South Carolina, Dawn Staley said Sanaya Fagan is our most talented post player, but she's got to learn how to be consistent on defense. That has been the one thing holding her back. I'm interested to see. I personally think the Ashlyn Watkins situation gets resolved during the first appearance, which I believe is set for October 25th. How much time does she miss? How much time does it take her to ramp up? Is she, does Dawn Staley tack on suspension of games, or is it just getting her in game shape and getting her ready to go? But I look at that with Kitts and Fagan, and then Tack and Edwards, and then you throw in Ashlyn Watkins, who could be an SEC Defensive Player of the Year. And then, quite frankly, I don't think South Carolina needs to have a go-to post player, because to me, they have the most firepower on the perimeter Dawn Staley has ever coached, with Raven Johnson, Tahina Powpow, Breezy Hall, and then you've got, like I said, Malaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson, and you got Mighty Mouse, who is Maddie from D.C., from Baltimore, right? Maddie McDaniel. She steps in as a 5'9" jet who plays like Mighty Mouse. She's coming in. Joyce Edwards is coming in. Adele Tack is healthy now. She's back. And Joyce Edwards was the best high school player in the country last year. No doubt about it. So, to me, it is an embarrassment of riches. But those can be problems too. It's problems when you just won a national championship. You got your head in the clouds from coming back to the White House, and you're going to have a target on your back, because clearly that was not the case going into last season with 0 starters returning, nobody knowing how good South Carolina, their young players like Kitts and others. This year, they're going to have the target on their back. And then it's, how do you manage the egos and figure out how to play 10 players every night? Because this team is supremely deep. I mean, those are great problems to have, but they can still be problems because of social media, because of parents, because of players' expectations. How does Dawn Staley and her staff handle that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I feel like we talked about that all summer too, right? Like this is when she's going to have to do, and the whole staff, they're going to have to do their best, kind of like politicking and communication and things like that, trying to keep people in the loop as to what's going on, because I'm sure that part of why people might feel like they need to leave is because they just maybe they don't feel heard, or they don't understand, I guess, like what their kind of bigger picture thing would be, like whether that's what the coaches have in mind or what they have in mind in competing views and things like that, right? But yeah, I mean, it's hard because we look at Coach Staley's teams over the last like several years and we're like, well, she's done this before a lot of the time, right? But like also she's, by her own admission, you know, she's like, what we had with the freshies, like that's never going to happen again. It's never going to happen again anywhere, right? Because you just had this perfect group of individuals who were all on the same page, who all wanted to stay together and do something great at South Carolina. And now you have the transfer portal, you have NIL, you have conference realignment and all kinds of things, right? And so you just don't ever really know what's going to happen. And this team is so, like, looking back at the freshies as well, too, like, I think that for a large portion of their time here, she could pull the seniority card, you know, with that and be like, your time's coming and all of that. But this is such a young team that has players from top to bottom who are proven and who proved that they were an integral part of a national championship. Like you talked about Malaysia and Tessa, like, you know, they were freshmen, but one of them was an all Final Four player and the other one was the first freshman to win SEC tournament MVP since Candace Parker. Like, that's nuts. So it's hard to anything. If you're in a group of like since Candace Parker, then like, you know, that's a crazy accomplishment. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, I guess, what happens, because we know from what Coach Staley has talked about the way that she approaches recruiting and how she wants to make it to where players and their families, particularly their parents, she's talked a lot about parents being kind of, you know, tapped in and buying into what they're trying to accomplish there and what their vision for their child is as far as a roadmap through their college career and everything. But she's talked about how she prioritizes making sure that people just like get it and get what they're trying to do. So you could have a super talented player who just doesn't necessarily vibe with the way that people do things in South Carolina. And that's just, you know, it's just not a fit kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean, every year it gets harder, right? I'm sure her pitch gets harder because it's like, yes, do you want to play with the best players in the nation? And do you want a chance to win a national championship every year? Yeah, I do. But I also want to get on the court and I see all the people who are on your roster and I acknowledge the fact that that's going to be a very difficult thing to do quickly. So, you know, we'll see I'm interested to see what happens with the class of 2025 because we've kind of had a flurry of verbal commitments lately and South Carolina there's been kids that South Carolina has offered who haven't obviously committed because there's no class of 2025 yet. I don't think that's like the end of the world if they get a small class or maybe not a quite as highly touted class. Excuse me. But yeah, you got to wonder, like, when do you get to a point where you're kind of like, quote unquote, at capacity for some of these top, like, you know, 10, 15 recruits or whatever, right? In trying to lure more people here to continue building on what you've created.
So South Carolina will lose 4 players. Their eligibility will be up after this season. Tina Powell, Sanaya Fagan, Breezy Hall, and Sakima Walker. That still leaves 9 players, all of whom, 7 of whom are McDonald's All-Americans, and Chloe Kitts reclassified and came in early. She would have been a McDonald's All-American, and Adele Tack, had she been healthy, would have been a McDonald's All-American. And so there's still going to be 9 great players coming back for next season before you add a single player, which I do still expect South Carolina to add 2 or 3 elite high school prospects from this class. And then if there is a need, there is the transfer portal. And who wouldn't want to play for Dawn Staley. So we know the schedule's going to be tough. It's out. Texas, Oklahoma joined the league. Texas and South Carolina, of course, are playing twice, which you won't because those are two Final Four caliber teams. Kim Mulkey still at LSU, although I don't know that they'll be better. Tennessee has a new coach. I'm interested to see what they do. But the SEC is going to be stacked. It is the best conference in the country. And, you know, South Carolina plays NC State, UCLA, Michigan, and others in the preseason schedule. Stanford's new coach obviously backed out of that deal. So no Stanford, but I don't expect them to be the same after Tara Vanderveer retired. Their best player transfers to Southern Cal. Early with South Carolina and Southern Cal were playing in Las Vegas. I think everybody would have been up for that. So any closing thoughts on what you're looking for from this team? I guess they'll be streaming on ESPN in the St. Jude's charity game at Memphis on October the 15th. So we're inside of 2 weeks away from that.
Yeah, I'm excited for basketball to start back up. Really early exhibition. I know Coach Staley got asked about that the other day, and she was basically just saying, you know, like we didn't have room to return to them. So luckily their coaching staff was nice about trying to get an exhibition in and being able to benefit a good cause as well while doing that, which harkens back to last year's exhibition where they were raising money for breast cancer patients and their families with the Rutgers exhibition. So very cool in that. But yeah, I'm really just interested to see, I guess, like potential lineups being tested out in this first exhibition. I think that's like the primary thing because, you know we haven't gotten to talk to any players yet, but their mindset, I'm intrigued to see whenever we get to talk to them, kind of like what it is that they want to say about the year. I know Coach Staley was talking about like she's not necessarily thinking about repeat season, and she's mostly worried about, you know, let's just get out there, play well, and then, you know, earn our way to number one by the end of the season, things like that. But the players, obviously, you know, they have a motivation tactic that they have to have within themselves to get them to that point. And the revenge tour was part of that last year. And I think the repeat tour will be part of that this year. So I'm intrigued to see, not that they would necessarily need to like come out guns blazing against Memphis in an exhibition game, but, you know, like whenever we get to talk to them, I'm intrigued to hear what their kind of like mindset is this year after being kind of underestimated last year. And then this year, you know, obviously being de-chased. So yeah, I think the primary thing that I will be looking at for that exhibition is what lineups will be tested out. How is that going to look? What matchups are we going to see? And then shortly after that, I think actually the next day is SEC tip-off. So then we can ask about whatever we want from the exhibition because you know, even though most of us probably won't be able to go to Memphis for it, we'll be able to go to Birmingham and see, kind of pick Coach Staley's brain, seeing what this group looks like together. So yeah, I think it'll be good, and I'm ready for stuff to get rolling. I'm sure everybody else is too.
So me personally, I'm expecting on October 15th, and again, Dawn Staley may go totally off the books because it is an exhibition game and it is early. But I would expect Raven Johnson, Dahina Powell, Breezy Hall, Chloe Kitts, and Sanaya Fagan to be the first five out there. And then I think it gets interesting after that. Does Maddie McDaniel play point guard and you play Full Wiley and Tessa on the wings, and then you have Dowda and Joyce Edwards or Adele Tack. I mean, that's still 11 players, and I hadn't even mentioned Ashlyn Watkins, who, won't be in that game. I mean, that's going to be, and I would expect even for Sakima Walker to be better this year. I don't know what her role will be, but I mean, it's pretty valuable to have as your 13th player the former junior college national player of the year who is 6'5".
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of surprised to see her decide to come back just because I feel like her announcement came out kind of late. But yeah, I'm super interested to see what Sakima looks like this year. We didn't get to see a lot of her last year, but I feel like she has so much potential, and I'm really intrigued to see how she gets utilized and everything like that. I think the one thing last year when we saw her play was that she looked like the pace was kind of a bit of a struggle for her, but a year's worth of conditioning and playing with your teammates and stuff in practices and the highlighters and all that kind of stuff could do wonders. So if she can kind of, I guess, like speed it up a little bit, I think she could be really fun. I think she could be really fun to watch.
No doubt about it. So, Payton, we're glad you are up and around and feeling better. Get rid of that cough as soon as you can. And we always appreciate you coming on. We look forward to reading what you have to say about the team. And we'll look forward to having you on down the road. Thanks for doing this. I know we've been working on it for 3 weeks. You've been battling, getting back to 100%. So we're glad you could join us for a little while. Be well, get better, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for being patient as we waited for me to be able to come on. So yeah, I always enjoy talking hoops with you. So thank you.
All right. Take care. That was Payton Titus, the award-winning beat writer from Go Gamecocks and the state. And so that will do it for me today. Tomorrow we will, on Gamecock Pod Daily, have the best of the coordinators' quick hitters. And then we'll close out the week with a Football Friday show. And so for Alex Jones and Payton Titus, this is Keith Allsep saying God bless. Our hearts go out to everybody who's been affected by the storm. Hope everybody gets power, cable, internet back quickly. And our thoughts and prayers for the communities that were really ravaged by this storm. So until next Wednesday, we'll be back, same bat time, same bat channel. For our patrons, I'll be back tomorrow. This has been episode 1586 for Gamecock Pod Live. This is Keith Allsep saying, Gamecocks, God bless, and I'm out of here.